Hi everyone, so thanks for joining us today for the Beginner's Guide to Research Resources. So for those of you that haven't met me before, my name's Sarah and I work at Calderdale Libraries. So I'm based in the local studies and information team at Halifax Library. But we do have different libraries sort of across Calderdale, and what you'll find is that whilst our main collection is in Halifax, it's always worth sort of considering that there are other libraries that might have like bits and pieces of interesting information as well. So what we're going to do today is I'm just going to introduce you to some library resources. Some of them will only be available if you actually come and visit us, because that's what we want you to do, like eventually anyway. But some of them are available digitally, and some of them you might be able to request depending on copyright and so on. So if in doubt, it's always worth just sort of dropping us an email and asking, because we're generally quite friendly and we want people to be able to access the information that we have. So just let us know. I'll put contact details on the end of the thing. So I'm going to be showing you a little bit of our catalogue and listings of various resources. And I've got a little bit of a presentation to start with, just to give you a bit of an idea about the sort of things that we have. So just to let you know, so it's a bit confusing because our building is Central Library and Archives. So we are actually based in the same building as the West Yorkshire Archives. And what you'll find is there is a fair bit of crossover between resources available, but where the archives tend to have original documents. So they've obviously got the diaries and sort of plans for different houses and things like that. We've got more published works. So obviously we've got lots of books, but we've also got photographs, newspapers, pamphlets, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to start this little presentation just to give you a couple of examples of things that we hold. So the first thing we've got is loads and loads of pamphlet boxes. So this is where basically everything that's a little bit random and a little bit small goes. So this is like just a photograph that I took from inside our stacks whilst I was sort of sat on the floor. We've actually got, I think maybe about 300 of these boxes, and each one of them is divided into like a different subject. So the one that I've picked is Halifax Parish Church. So this is just an example of a couple of the boxes that we might have for Halifax Parish Church. So we'll have things like architectural details about the church. So things like the Halifax church woodwork. So some of these were sort of written in the 19th century. Some of them are more recent. We've also got things like sermons. So a couple of the sermons that we've got, Anne Lister actually references in her diaries. So things like she goes to the Reverend Musgrave's first sermon. So if you wanted to look that up, you could come into the library and have a look at the sermon and see what he had to say at this sort of service that she went and attended. So a lot of the resources that we've got, you might not like initially think, oh, wow, that's Anne Lister related. But if you're looking in at the background and to sort of get a bit more of an idea about what Halifax was like at the time, what was going on in politics, things that she references, then quite often we've got like little snippets like this that aren't like super obvious, but they can be useful to look at. So pamphlet boxes are always they're just fun to look through as well, because you just come across really random things. And then another thing in the Halifax Parish Church box was this Halifax Vicar's rate. So this is related to tithe payments and things. So all that sort of thing is quite useful just to sort of know about the money and the land distribution and stuff of Halifax. And related to that, this is a really random thing we've got, which is a £1 note from Christopher Rawson's bank. So we've actually got a fair few bits and pieces that are related to the Rawson family, because they were like really significant sort of in Halifax. We've got a few things that are sort of quite useful. So I know like some people have been looking into various people that Anne Lister references in the diaries or has dealings with. So it might be that we've got stuff related to the Rawsons or the Walkers or whoever as well. So there are pamphlets. So the next thing we've got, this doesn't really have a category it comes under. So this is the Cronest Estate Papers related to Anne Walker. So I've been working at a library for 5 years, and a couple of years ago, I just stumbled across these going, oh, crow nest, I wonder what that is. And it turns out that when the estate was sold in 1867, we've actually got the original documents from it. So we've got the map that was provided in the sales particulars, and then various sort of pages that describe the estate and all the little houses and tenants' houses and things that were all sold at the same time. So it's really like interesting to look at, and that's something that you can request us to sort of send you a copy of. But it just gives you an idea about how huge Anne Walker's estate was as well, more than anything. But yeah, so the original document of this is now living in West Yorkshire Archives, because we looked at it and was like, oh, that's quite delicate and old. But you can look at copies if you come in a library, and we have got digital copies as well. So another Anne Walker related thing, which might not be super obvious to you. So this is a charities endowment book, and it's from 1896, but basically it describes all the charities that exist in Halifax and what they do and how much money they give to people and so on. And this one is Anne Walker's. So it's got an entry in Anne Walker. Spelt wrong, it's got an E on the end, but it is definitely her, and it refers to her as being Anne Walker of Shibden Hall, which is quite nice, and it describes the money that she left to be given to the people of Lightcliff, basically. So another thing we've got are handbills. So these are basically posters. They would have been either appeared in newspapers or just been posted around town. So a lot of the ones we've got are prior to sort of newspapers being produced. We've got some from like 17th century, 18th, and a lot of these are all 19th century ones that sort of vaguely relate to Anne Lister. So the first one is a notice that Northgate House is being let. And we know that Anne Lister's father lived there and it was part of her estate. And then she built like a casino or something random later. I think she turned it into some sort of exciting thing. But yeah, so that's something that's worth looking at. And the next one is to do with a lake being filled in 1836, I think it is, on Jonathan Mallinson's land. And we know that Jonathan Mallinson was a tenant of Anne Lister's, and it also refers to it being below Shibden Hall. There's a couple of reasons we know that Jonathan Mallinson is a tenant, partly because his relatives got in touch with us and were like, oh, what's that handbill you've got related to my relatives? But also he's referenced quite a lot in the diaries because he was a landlord of the Stag's Head. And when Anne Lister wanted to support political candidates, she was going around to tenants sort of saying, you need to vote Tory and so on. And he's one of the ones that she references quite a few times. So that's quite interesting to see. And the final one is, you might not be able to see it very well, but it's a list of subscribers to fund the relief of the poor. So this is before the poor law reforms. So basically the poor, it's before workhouses were sort of mainstream really. So most poor would be supported in their own homes, and it would be supported by various landowners and so on. So it's like almost like a tax, I guess, but I think it's sort of vaguely voluntary. But when you look at the list, the top ones are like Christopher Rawson, the Waterhouse family, and so on. So you can sort of see who the people who had the most money are, because I think even if it wasn't obligatory, societal pressure would expect them to sort of pay more money. And we have got Captain Lister down there, and then there's an entry for some the plural of Miss Listers, so more than one Miss Lister, which I suspect could be Anne Lister, it could be her aunt, or it could be sort of whoever was living, the women that were living at the house at the time, but we're not really sure. So like, I guess my role as like a library assistant is I'm not necessarily doing that huge research and finding out the significance of it, but I can be like, oh, that's vaguely related to Anne Lister or Anne Walker or whatever. Maybe you want to sort of go and have a look at that. Yeah, I just come across things and post it and go, oh, that looks interesting. Maybe someone wants to find out more about it. So the next thing we've got are illustrations. So a lot of the illustrations we've got are sort of pre-photography. So these two illustrations are both of Halifax Parish Church, and they were both produced in Anne Lister's lifetime. The first picture is by Moore, and we know that it was produced in Anne Lister's lifetime, partly because she actually references buying the illustrations in a diary. And we know that when her library was sold, she sort of sold some of the illustrations as well. So it's just nice for sort of seeing what the church would have looked like in a time. And also they're just like nice to look at. And then the other thing we've got, these are also illustrations, and these are ones that were actually painted in the 1890s, but they are like a retrospective. So they're painted in the 1890s, but as they would have looked in the 1840s. And these are quite interesting because they actually have like the shops names and stuff on them. So they're quite good to look at. And then the other illustrations we've got a huge collection of are political cartoons. So these are all cartoons that would have appeared for the 1832 and the 1835 elections that we know Anne Lister had lots to say about. So these are quite interesting to look at and sort of see what the opinions were of the people that drew them. A lot of them are by this person called, well, not a real person, but someone that went under the name of Humphrey Thwackum. And yeah, we've got a large collection of them, so they're worth sort of having a look through because they're just quite interesting. And the final thing that we'll look at before I go and have a look at the catalogues and stuff are our photographs. So I won't talk too much about these because I know that if you look at the research that Pat with Potential have done into the Halifax Parish Church, they've sort of looked at these photographs as well and sort of used them to reference the plans. But in 1878, there were loads of renovations done in the parish church, and the photograph on the left is before the renovation, so you can see the pulpit here. And then this photograph on the right is from about 1890, so this is after the renovations were done. So the photographs could be quite useful for sort of comparing timescales and how things have changed. And we'll have a little bit more of a look at some other photographs later. But for now, I'm just going to come out of the PowerPoint presentation. And I'm just going to click onto the library catalogue. So if you want to find out what resources we have in the library, there's about 3 places you can look, but the most obvious one to look at is the library catalogue. So it's just calderdale.gov.uk/libraries. And then we click search the catalogue. So Steph is putting the links in the chat as well, but you can get in touch with me afterwards and I can send you a list of links, or they'll be on the, I think we'll publish the chat on when the YouTube video goes up and stuff. So when you first go onto it, it's a little bit fuzzy looking, this front page, because we've got loads of stuff that we've put on the front page to do with COVID. So like select and collect, that's still there, and access to Ancestry, which you can access at home at the moment with a Calderdale card. But basically, search the catalogue is just up at the top here. So you can do like a really basic sort of search. So we could just do Halifax Parish Church, but we've also got an advanced search. And I'd always recommend just going into advanced just because it gives you a couple more options to narrow it down. So if I type in Halifax Parish Church in the title, the main things I'd look at, I won't worry too much about location. Most of them will be at Central Library. But when you find resources that you think might be interesting, just check where they are. The main thing I would narrow it down by a collection. So most of them are going to be reference local studies reading materials or reference local studies images. We can leave it for now just to see what results we get. So we can see that we've got 213 items that mention Halifax Parish Church. Some of them are going to be might be really useful. Some of them might just mention the church. Some of them might, you know, just be. So this one's, there's nothing in the title of it, Album of Notable and Ancient Yorkshire Churches. But when we click on it, there's a mention in the comments. So someone saying there's outlining the history and architecture of the Halifax Parish Church. So sometimes there'll be like articles within magazines. Go back. So there's various ways you could narrow it down. You could narrow it down by to just look at photographs. You could narrow it down just to look at things that aren't photographs. The other thing, if you know how to use the Dewey Decimal System, which is a list of numbers that relate to different subjects. So we know that church architecture is Dewey number 726. So if I put 726 in the Dewey class, we've only got 12 results, and this tells us more, gives us more articles that are related to the architecture of the church. So you might want to look through those and see if any of those are what you want to look at. Go back again. General Anglican churches comes under 283, so we could sort of search for 283 as well. And then here you'll get more kind of sermons and things that have happened in the church, so events and so on. So bequests to the Halifax Parish Church Library. What you'll find is everything has been catalogued like over the last 20 years. And depending on the time that they were catalogued and whatever, the entries and the details might be slightly different. So currently we're going through every single entry and sort of updating them. But I mean, that's like a 5-year sort of project. But you might find that some of them have got lots of information here and some of them haven't. So the thing to do if you come across something that's just a bit vague and it just says Halifax Parish Church pamphlet is to ask us. And what we can do, because we do 15 minutes free research basically before we start charging you for things. So we can just get it out and have, if you're not here, we can be like, oh yeah, this looks really interesting, or, you know, give you a really vague sort of thing about what it actually is. But also if you're local, just pop in and see us or make an appointment to see us. Okay. So just go back a little bit. So the other thing to look at is view availability. So if you find something you think looks interesting, you want to know where it is. So this is Central Library, reference local studies, reading materials, reference pamphlet box, ask staff. So at the beginning, I showed you the picture of some of the pamphlets. So what you would do is get in touch with us, say, I've seen this in a pamphlet box. Can I have a look at it? And we go, yes, come in and see us. Or if it's out of copyright and it's not too much of a faff, we might be able to send you a copy of it sort of by email, and there'd just be like a small charge for that. What else was I going to show you? Oh yeah, so you can look at, one thing you can do is if you wanted to look at all our prints and illustrations and you knew what category they came under, so you could do, so all our prints and illustrations come under 942.746 PRI for print. So 942746 in Dewey numbers is history and geography of Calderdale. So basically anything that's not really obviously something else comes under that category. So like if you search for 942746, you'll come across like thousands of entries, but the prints and illustrations are narrowed down by putting that PRI at the end. So the first page I would ignore because for some bizarre reason, there are loads of aerial photographs in prints and illustrations, but they're photographs. So I'm not entirely sure why that's happened, but it'll come up in alphabetical order. So this is a Humphrey Thwackum cartoon, Alas Poor Fred, Thy Occupation Gone. You could be like, what is that? And you'd ask us to sort of say what it is. It hasn't got a date on it, but we might be able to work it out from the cartoon when we look at it. Yeah, so drawing of a statue dedicated to William Coolhurst. So we know that he was around in Anne Lister's time, so that's something that you might also be sort of interested in. So very few of the items in local studies actually will have a photograph on. The only things that have photographs on are ones that are like fairly recent publications, and it'll just have the picture of the book. And that's just because they're pulled from like a central database. So basically, if we've not bought it from the place that we buy books from, there won't be a picture on it. But we have got a digital archive, which I'm going to show you next. So we've got an archive called Weaver to Web. This is our, this is like was a huge project. So when you're looking at this, you need to bear in mind, this project was done in the year 2000, which is in internet terms is like a long time ago. And it was a huge funded project. It took like, they had dedicated local historians that went through a lot of our collection, and it was digitized by volunteers. So there's something like 20,000 images on here. So some of them are photographs, but some of them are also books and pamphlets and so on that have been digitized. So it's part of a project basically to make our collection more accessible, but also to sort of preserve some of the more delicate items. So this is, again, is fully searchable. So there is like a little bit of background information on all of the items. And there's also a couple of things you might find quite useful in that there's a timeline, which just gives you a bit of a background to the history of Halifax. So if we click on the timeline, so we can have a look in 1810 to 1850, and it'll just give us a vague idea about what was going on. So we know that it was like second wave industrial revolution. So there's a couple of pictures and some texts, and it'll just give you a bit of an idea about sort of challenges that were happening, changes to Halifax and so on. But the main thing probably that you'll be interested in, yeah, there's also information about sources and themes. So it'll tell you a little bit about some of the sources and where they come from. So it's worth sort of just having a little bit of a flick around and seeing what there is on there. But the main thing you'll be interested in is searching. So this is only a tiny percentage of our resources, but if you're obviously not local, then it's worth looking here first to see what you can find. So if we click on search, there's two ways of searching. There's a keyword search, or there's a document type search. So if we know that we're looking for directories, we could just click by the document type of directory. If we knew that we wanted to look for Halifax Parish Church, we could just put Halifax Parish Church in the search box. I'm going to show you a couple of examples from Trade Directories just to show you like why they can be helpful for research and just sort of glean in little bits of information. So some of these directories are sort of prior to censuses being carried out. So they'll have trade, so local businesses listed, but also a lot of them have just got addresses of like notable people in Halifax. So the first thing we're going to look at is Walker's directory of the parish of Halifax. So if I click on it, just keep an eye on the time. And this is like 200 pages or something. 3.3 is the page that I want. So you have to click on enlarge image a couple of times to get it big enough to sort of see properly. Try enlarging it again. And we're looking for the Walkers. So here we can see in 1845, we've got Miss Anne Walker living at Cliff Hill at Lightcliff. So that places are there. We know that she was living there in 1845. And then again, if we wanted to look a little bit earlier, I'm going to do a search because I know that the directory I'm looking for is called Baines. So I'm just going to search for Baines. And I'm looking for the Lightcliff. So what they've done here, rather than digitizing the whole directory as like 500 pages, they've split it into different areas in Calderdale. So I want Lightcliff. So I'm going to enlarge the image. And again, I'm looking for Walker to see who we've got. So this is from 1822. So we've got John Walker Esquire living at Pronest. And we've also got Miss Mary Walker living at Cliff Hill. So here you've got like the principal person that's living here. So generally it would be the man, but like I was like, oh, who's Mary? And then it's one of her aunts who died just later in that year. So this is like the last year that she'd appear. And she was like 76 years old or something when she died. But she was obviously like listed. There must have been no men living there at that point. I'm assuming Aunt Anne was there as well, but she's the one that was listed. So again, that's something that could take you down a bit more of a rabbit hole of research to sort of find out, you know, who exactly was there and what was going on. So I just wanted to show you a couple more things from the photographic collection. So there's quite a lot of photographs on Weaver to Web. Some of them are quite recent and some of them are sort of 19th century. One thing to look for, I'd say one of our most significant photograph collections is the Halifax Photographic Society collection. And they're quite recent, but they can be quite useful, particularly if you're looking at sort of working class areas. So basically they were taken in the 1960s and onwards, and they were taken at a time that when there was a lot of slum clearances and a lot of redevelopment. So they were taken to sort of capture Halifax before it was, lots of it was pulled down. So it's basically, if you're looking for a building and it didn't get pulled down in the sort of Victorian regeneration, then it quite likely got pulled down in the 1960s, and there might be a photograph of it. So I'm just going to do a quick search for the Wool Merchant. Some of the photographs are later as well, because basically they really liked it and they just carried on taking photographs for the next 20 years of Halifax. But yeah, this is the Wool Merchant Hotel. So any of you that have stayed in Halifax, you might have stayed here, just sort of over the road. And this is what it looked like in the late 1970s. So it's just to show you, sort of, it gives you a bit of an idea about what Halifax looked like at different times. Okay, so so basically my recommendation is have a good play on Weaver to Web and see what there is digitally. If you want to use stuff, basically, some of it will be in copyright because we were just given permission to put it on Weaver to Web, but not for it to be used by other people. Some of it's out of copyright, but basically we just say, email and ask us if you want to use an image for everything. And if it's okay copyright wise, we'll generally say yes with the credit, but just ask us is the principle. And if it's not, we'll tell you, you know, if you need to do a bit more research. So I'm just going to quickly look at newspapers because I've got loads to cover. One of the most useful things that we've got at Calderdale Libraries is back issues of newspapers and newspaper clippings. So just go back onto this quick presentation, if it'll let me. Yeah, so we've got various newspaper related things that you can access. So actually in the library, we've got newspaper clippings. These were inherited from the Halifax Courier originally, and we just add to them daily and weekly as we go on. So we've just created lots of COVID envelopes to sort of see how that was recorded in the local press. These are our old school microfilm readers. We do also have digital readers as well, but these it was more scenic photograph. We've also got news clipping books. So some of them are big bound volumes of newspaper clippings that various historians have taken at the time. So a couple of those are, we've got some of John Lister's, some of Horsfall Turner's, a lot of the people who were around in like 1900, 1910, the antiquarians were quite active. We've ended up with their newspaper clippings books. So this is one of John Lister's where he recorded extracts from Anne Lister's diary. So we've got all the original extracts from the Halifax Guardian that he published. So the next thing so some of our newspapers have been digitised and some of them haven't. So we've got these are a couple of death notices. So this one is from the Halifax Guardian. And then you can only find by looking through the physical microfilms. But these two are ones that have both been digitised. So the Leeds Times and Leeds Mercury are both available on British Newspaper Archives and 19th century British newspapers. So they're both searchable databases. But I'm going to show you very quickly, British Newspaper Archives, just something to watch out for. So British Newspaper Archives is a subscription service. If you're a member of Calderdale Libraries, you can come in and we'll sign you into it. If you're a member of a UK library, your library will probably subscribe to it. If you're outside the UK, you might have to sort of pay for a subscription. So what I'm going to do is very quickly do an advanced search. So we know that Anne Walker died on 5th of February, 1854. So I'm going to search in the keywords for Walker. I'm going to do the publication, see if I can get through this in 5 minutes and then take your questions. So publication title, I'm looking for the Halifax Guardian. I'm expecting to see it in 1854. So I'm just doing like a bit of a fuzzy search. So when we look through the results, there's no death notice for Anne Walker if we put Walker in the results. But I know, because the other handy thing that I've not shown you is we have got some births, marriage and deaths that have been indexed. So if we go to Calderdale Libraries page again, so calderdale.gov.uk/libraries, local studies and family history, birth, marriage and death records. So this is indexed A to Z. So we're looking for Walker. So I won't do, we're sort of running out of time, so I won't do a full search, but basically there's an entry that says on the 4th of March, 1854, there is an entry for Anne Walker's death on page 8. So I'm like, that's interesting. So I went and found it on the manual microfilms. I was like, yeah, it's definitely there. It's not an error. Went back to the British Newspaper Archives. We know it was the 4th of March. So I'm just narrowing it down to the 4th of March, 1854. Taken out Walker from the search. So all I'm going to get is that Halifax Guardian. 4th of March, 1854. I know it's on page 8. In the last 5 years, I've looked at approximately 6,000 death notices. So I know that it's going to be on the bottom right, because they always are. And they're not alphabetical at this time period, but she is there. On Saturday last at Cliff Hill, Lightcliff, Anne, younger daughter of the late John Walker, Esquire of Crownest, age 50. So it's just something to show you, just to watch out. Like if you don't find something on the British Newspaper Archives, it's because sometimes, especially with death notices and stuff, a keyword search won't bring it up. But if you know when the date is, then have a look for that. And also just, where is my thing gone? Yeah. So this local history page is quite useful to tell you a bit more information about some of our collections. So it's got birth, marriage and death. We've also got a local history newspaper index. So this is where I found where Anne Lister's death notice was initially, because it's actually, there's an article about it and her obituary is listed. So have a look at this as well. So it's just calderdale.gov.uk/libraries and then local and family history. We've also got access to ancestry and stuff, but I'm not going to talk about that because I think Natalie's going to talk about that in the next session. But what I'll do is have a look at some of your questions, because we've got 10 minutes left. So I'll scroll down. Yeah, someone said about the collection. So yeah, up until a few months ago, the Halifax Guardian wasn't on the British Newspaper Archive, so it's always worth double checking. And also you'll find that sometimes there might be like years missing, so you might get like 1870 and then nothing for a couple of years and then like 1873, but I mean they're just updated all the time, so it's worth looking at. Can you confirm that the charities book mentioned is in the library? Yeah, it's definitely in the library. I looked at it yesterday. It may be that if you've asked West Yorkshire Archives about it, they might have also gone and looked at it because they know it's there. I think Dan might have been the one that told me about it initially, like a few years ago. He was like, oh, do you know about this that you've got? So yeah, but you can come into the library and look at it, or it's 1896, so it should be fine for us to send you a copy if you wanted. Just drop us an email. How's it determined if historical items at the library are housed instead? So generally, if it's published, it'll end up in the library. We've got two types of things that belong to the library that are stored with West Yorkshire Archives. So there's one thing like the Cronest papers, which are super, super delicate, and we wouldn't particularly want, because they're just really brittle, you see. So we wouldn't particularly want people to look at them. So they are living in the West Yorkshire Archive search room, but people can only view the copies that we've taken. We got them photographed and stuff. It's some of it depends on who they were donated to as well. The other thing we've got that live in the West Yorkshire Archives is we have got a rare collection. So things like James Bolton's illustrations, who was like a 18th century naturalist. So those belong to the library, but they're in the West Yorkshire Archives special collection. So if you wanted to see them, you'd ask the West Yorkshire Archives. So basically, if they're really delicate, they're probably in the archives. But top tip is if you're looking at references, sort of on historic articles and things like that, West Yorkshire Archives, Halifax Archives, Halifax Library are all used interchangeably. And part of it's because it's changed, like the responsibility over the years, and part of it's just because like people don't always reference it properly. So if you can't find something that's referenced as living at Halifax Library, it's worth checking the archives catalogue as well, and vice versa. Yeah, so the Weaver to Web is maintained by the library staff. We do add bits and pieces as we can. So the last thing that we added was we were donated a load of letters about John Fielden and about the Mankinholes riots. So it's all related to like poor law resistance and stuff. And they were digitised just before lockdown. The thing with Weaver to Web is, as well as the items being digitised, we also put a lot of information on it. So the letters have got transcripts aside them. So we tend not to just do a photograph dump. We tend to make sure that we've got all the information to go with them. Because during lockdown, during lockdown, we were in the library taking we had lots of periods where we were there for like a month and then we were locked down again. So during that time, we actually ended up digitising quite a lot of stuff that's sort of sitting around in various places waiting to go on Weaver to Web. So probably like the political cartoons and stuff might be able to go up there. We just need to double check copyright and all that lot and make sure we've got something well written to go up with it to explain what they are and stuff. So yeah, we do add to them from time to time. But yeah, we've just got quite a lot on as well because we've not funded it. It's just sort of doing it as and when we can. Is there a cut-off or year up to which you archive material from? No, I mean, we're creating like future library resources and archives as well. So we get donations of pamphlets and things all the time. We've just bought, so if anyone's releasing a book, let us know, because we always buy copies for the local history library. So I've just bought I've requested the library buys like Janet Lee's book and Lynn Farrow's book and things like that. And we'll have some lending copies, but we'll have some that are kept for prosperity, sort of in the local history collection as well. So it's an ongoing project. We keep adding to it. So to consult something in Calderdale. So if you come into Calderdale, you don't have to pay for it. So you just come in. Basically, we do 15 minutes research for free, and then we charge, I think it's like £15.50 per half hour of research. If it's just a case of looking for something and sending a newspaper article over or something, and we find it within that 15 minutes, we'll just charge, it's about £2.50, like admin fee, and then the copy is like quite minimal. But if you email us with what you want, we can sort of get back to you and let you know. We only have capacity to do like an hour of research, so we won't kind of do it every day. We do have some pen pals that, like, yeah, every 3 months they'll send us a request for an hour's research, and that's okay, but at some point we'd say, you know, that's enough, sort of thing. I think we've got some links. So you don't have to live in Calderdale to be a member, but you have to be coming to the library to join up. And that's just because of some of our digital resources. If you sign up online and you're not coming into Halifax, we're breaking our licensing agreements with them. But if you were, say, in Halifax for a couple of months doing research and you're coming into the library or whatever, then we'd sign you up there. Or if you live, like, I mean, I live on the border of 3 different authorities. So because I can go in, I'm the member of 3 different authority libraries, kind of thing, where you don't have to live in Calderdale, but you have to be able to come into the library so we don't inadvertently break our licensing agreements with some of the things that are available remotely. If anyone's got, I think we've got 3 minutes left or something. Yeah, do come and see us in March and April. Yes, so if anyone wants a list of links and helpful resources, because there are a couple of things that I didn't really cover. So we have got there's some external links. So Halifax Antiquarian Society. If you're looking for research, always start with them, because one, they're really good for like doing overviews of like a subject or a place, and two, they tend to be quite good at referencing. So you can like look at the references and then sort of see what you need to look up in the library or the archives and stuff, and sort of, yeah, they're really good starting points. But things like that I can send you links to. So my email is just sarah.rose@calderdale.gov.uk. For general inquiries, we've got the reference library as well. So reference.library@calderdale.gov.uk, because I might not be there, or whatever, one of my colleagues will pick it up if you've got an inquiry. But yeah, if you're interested and you want to know about what resources we've got or something in particular, then just drop us a line, and it might take us a couple of days to get back to you, but we'll see what we can do, kind of thing. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Oh yeah, the other thing I didn't mention was maps. So historic maps. Very quickly, if you go onto the Calderdale Council web page and search for historic maps, you can view the current map, do a search for an area, and then overlay historic maps. So that's well worth having a look, just to give you an idea about how an area has changed. Let me just wonder if. Very quickly. Oh, it's not going to let me do it. It's all right. Historic maps on the main Calderdale Council webpage. So I can zoom in on a current map. So this is just Hebden Bridge. So you could do a search for Shibden Hall or something, and then I can click through the historic maps to compare them. And it just give you an idea about how it's changed. The resolution isn't amazing on it, but if you see something and it's out of copyright, again, you can contact us and we can sort of see if we can send you a better photograph of the maps. These were all done at the same time as Weaver to Web, I think. So again, they're 20 years old or whatever. But yeah, it's quite handy just for sort of looking around. The thing to bear in mind is if you do a search, it needs to be a street that exists currently. So you can put an area in, we can just put Shibden Hall in, because we know that still exists. But if you're looking for a street that's been demolished, it won't find it.
All right, I think that's,
let you have a break.
That's our time, everybody. Yeah, thank you, Sarah, very much. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And we'll see more of you in more sessions of the summit.
Thank you all.